I'm Capuchin Braun. I lived many years ago in a community of which Brother Solanus was a significant member. You couldn't avoid him. I was one of 45 students, so I don't claim to have super knowledge. These are the things I remember. I once went to him to ask him to pray for something in my family. I can't even know what the issue was, but I never forgot the visit. First of all, you went to his room. It was the first time I was ever in there. And there was nothing. It was the barest room I ever saw in my life. Maybe 3 books. And yeah, he was a poor man. Literally. He was, he listened to what I was asking prayers for. I did the usual thing that Capuchin students did before talking to superiors, but somehow he seemed to warrant that kind of respect, so I knelt down. We always talked to our superiors kneeling. And he listened, and then he said in his inimitable tone of voice, "Oh, yeah, very high. It'll be all right. If you have faith, it'll be all right." And I was felt disappointed inside because my problem is I didn't have faith. So it didn't look good. And he's passing the ball back on me, and that's why I came in there, to live off his faith. And I left his room, and I remember saying to myself, "Hey man, this was useless." But as I reflected on him and heard more about his life, this was his pastoral approach. He had miracles probably, but he wasn't a miracle maker. He didn't set out to do miracles. What he set out to do is to ask people to have faith that they would get their own favors from God. He empowered people. And that made all the difference in the world. People then, when they left him, had to rummage in themselves to come up with the basic primary act of faith, that God was with them on their side, and if they believed all of that, there was better chances that things would improve. He passed the ball back at you. But I remember walking down the corridor and saying, "Oh my," still felt like it was that was easier said than done for me. It only took a while later in life that I got the point that that's the point of our faith and religion. There's a book written about Solanus. I think Michael Crosby wrote it. The title of it is Thank God Ahead of Time. He always asked people to thank God for the favors that they were going to receive. And that implied that they were, before they could thank God, they had to believe that they were going to receive Him. So we're back to the issue of faith. The second thing that comes to mind, living in a house with Solanus. One day I'm walking up the east steps off the north corridor from the basement to the north corridor, and then from the first floor up to the second floor of the Friary in Huntington, Indiana, and there was a great big crucifix, life-size crucifix at the top of those steps. And as he was wont to do, Solanus would always stop halfway up those steps and say hello to Jesus, or sometimes have a more extended prayer. And if you were in a hurry, there's one thing, you knew you can't go between him and Jesus, you just can't do that. So you had to go back down the steps to get the other stairway and hurry along to whatever you're going to do. In other words, he created traffic jams. But it was impressive. More in retrospect than an impetuous young 20-year-old. The next thing that was quizzical to me and of more interest maybe is that he would hunt gophers in the yard. Gophers were chewing up the roots of the grass. We had a lot of gopher holes. And I guess what we knew back on the farm is if you pour water down one hole, the gopher will come out the other, because they had a network of roads underneath. Well, what he did is he didn't pour much water. He just tied a string to a small stake, and at the end of the string was a noose, like a noose that you lasso with. And he put the noose on top of the gopher hole, and when the gopher came out, the noose was over the gopher's head, and the gopher was caught. Clever. The fourth thing that I remember is we always had a visit to the chapel at 2 in the afternoon before we went about our business, whatever the business was that day. And some days we would have a free day in the afternoon, free afternoon. And Solanus would be leading the prayer. Now the prayer at 2 o'clock in the afternoon is not meant to be long. Our expectations was that this was a fairly short prayer, because we had things to do and places to go. And so Solanus would extemporize and make up his prayer. And it would go for quite a length of time. As I said, we had places to go and things to do. I guess I was less than impressed. These are some of my recollections. He's Casey is a truly a product of his background. I think that we have to count the number of kids. I think it was 10 kids. There's 10 children and a mother and father there
Okay.
on that picture. And they didn't have much money. They had a small farm. But the picture itself has so much dignity to it. It was just typical of people on that age. Nobody was smiling. They were all looking their formal the best. And with their best suit on. And mother and father were dignified. And Casey came from those kind of roots. Now he went from that farm to other jobs. He went to St. Paul and he drove a streetcar. And then he went to the state penitentiary in Minnesota to work as a guard. And that's not a pretty boy job. So he was around before he ever looked at the Capuchins.
He was a man of the world.
And later on, I found out that some of his best friends in Detroit were political figures. And they would pick him up and take him places, and they would have wonderful political discussions.
Oh, wow.